balance it with the music. Right.
Hello, Ambassador. Nice to meet you again.
Kia ora. It's great to see you.
Kia ora?
Kia ora. That's a greeting in Te Reo Māori, the language of the Maori people of New Zealand. And it means, hi, pleased to meet you.
Oh, kia ora.
Kia ora. And we also have a custom called the hongi.
Hongi.
Can I teach you the hongi?
Oh, yes, please.
The hongi is a traditional Maori custom where we rub noses as a greeting. And when we do that, we breathe each other's breath, which is a symbol of sharing experience together. Should we try that?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Oh,
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Shall we?
Yes. So, Ambassador, I've heard that recently there was a musical band performance from New Zealand.
Yes, there was. There's a
Oh.
very interesting group called the Modern Maori Quartet,
Modern Maori
who
Quartet.
performed just recently in Seoul and Jeongju.
Oh.
They're a very interesting group, and I'd like to tell you a bit more about them. Would you like to come
yes.
inside and hear more?
Yes, please.
Come this way, please.
Thank you.
Now, would you like some coffee and some New Zealand biscuits?
Oh, yes, I would love to.
Try one of these. These are Anzac biscuits, this is shortbread, and these are what we call Afghans.
Which one do you want me to try first?
Why don't you try an Anzac biscuit? One of
Okay.
these.
Thank you. I love the texture. It's
Yeah.
kind of chewy.
Yeah. These are interesting biscuits. They're called Anzac biscuits,
Anzac.
which stands for Australia New Zealand Army Corps. And that was a group of soldiers who first got together before the First World War over 100 years ago. And Australian and New Zealand soldiers fought together in the First World War in particular. And for some reason, in memory of those soldiers, we make these biscuits. And every year there is a big national day called Anzac Day, where we remember the soldiers who fought and served and died for New Zealand and Australia. So when we eat the biscuits, we think of the dead soldiers.
I see. Thank you for the cookie.
Welcome.
So I know that New Zealand does emphasize diversity and also inclusiveness as well. Is there a historical backstory?
Well, New Zealand, as you say, is now a very diverse country. From the beginning, we've had a number of different races and people living together, including the Maori people, who were the original inhabitants of New Zealand. And today, New Zealand is one of the most diverse countries in the world. My city, Auckland, I think something like 40% of the population was born outside New Zealand. So today we have about 15% of our population is Asian origin, about 16% of Maori, and we know that by the year 2040, white people will be a minority in New Zealand because the populations of Asians, of Maori, of Pacifica people is growing rapidly. So for us, diversity is a very important part of who we are, but it's also a very important value for New Zealanders. So for a very long time, we've had a tradition of trying to ensure that we're a very inclusive society where diverse people can make a contribution to the economy and society. So for example, New Zealand was the first country in the world where women were able to vote in 1893. So there's been a strong tradition of empowering women, and we still have a way to go. But more recently, we've been working very hard on ensuring that we support the rights of the Indigenous Māori people, but of other minorities as well, such as LGBT people, immigrants, refugees, and so on. So it's a tremendously important value for us. We believe that a diverse society that enables everybody from diverse backgrounds to contribute to society is a stronger, a more resilient, and a happier society.
Right, right. You just spoke of Maori people, and I know that Maori language is an official language of New Zealand, and I also heard that there are a lot of tremendous efforts to preserve their culture and also tradition.
Yes.
Is there any culture or traditions that you would like to introduce to our viewers?
Well, it's a very rich culture. There's a lot of things we could talk about. I think I showed you the hongi earlier.
Yes.
But there's also the very famous Haka.
Haka.
You probably have heard of the Haka. It's particularly made famous by the All Blacks, the New Zealand rugby team. So before they play a big match, we always do the Haka, and it starts like people going like this.
Oh, yes, I've seen it before. Right, right.
And there are several versions of it, and it's a traditional challenge. So when you meet someone for the first time, you don't know whether they're friend or enemy.
Right.
So you set down a challenge and you try and scare them and intimidate them and show how strong and powerful you are in case they're enemies. But when they establish that you're friends, then you get to know each other and eat and drink together. So it looks quite scary, and it was designed to be scary, but it's actually a kind of a challenge and eventually a greeting.
I see. Very interesting. So there was a summit between President Moon Jae-in and Prime Minister Arirang last year.
Yes.
So how would you evaluate our current bilateral relations?
It's very good. It's excellent. As you say, President Moon Jae-in visited New Zealand last December, and he had a really good meeting with Prime Minister Ardern. They get on very well, personally. And I think that's partly because when we look around our region, there's really very few countries that have a progressive centre-left government like New Zealand and Korea. So the President and the Prime Minister, they kind of bonded together. And they share a very similar domestic agenda. They're both interested in inclusive economic growth, in involving people in the economy, in jobs for young people, and in spreading wealth around the community and reducing inequality. So I was in the meeting, and they spent a lot of time talking about issues like the minimum wage and how to build good jobs for young people in the future. They also talked about the concept of a well-being budget. So New Zealand this year has, for the first time, introduced a budget that is about well-being, not just about economic growth. So traditionally budgets are all about GDP growth and numbers and so on. And those are important. But we are now thinking there's more to life than economic growth. We need to be concerned about some of the serious social issues that affect people, about things like mental health and depression and suicide, about child poverty, about obviously environmental issues and climate change, and how these issues are affected by our economic spending. So when we do a budget, we want to think not just about how do we get higher economic growth, but how do we actually improve the well-being of our people and our environment, and not just this generation, but the next generation as well. So they talked about those sorts of issues, and as I say, they get on very, very well.
It's very impressive, the word well-being budget. How is it different from welfare budget?
I think welfare is included within that. So welfare for us tends to mean looking after people who need help. Right? So benefit pensions or unemployment benefits or assistance to people who need it. But well-being, I think, is a broader concept that is about everyone's well-being. People can be depressed even if they've got lots of money and they don't need any welfare. So issues of mental health, for example, go right across the community. So we think that well-being needs to look at everyone's well-being. So it's a very big concept, but the idea is to think about well-being and happiness as much as about economic growth.
I see. So now let's talk about the performance of Modern Maori Quartet. How did the group come to perform here in Korea?
Actually, it came about through a New Zealand-Korea connection. It was called the New Zealand-Korea Connection in 2015, 2016, where somebody from Jeongju Sori Festival visited New Zealand. And while down in New Zealand, she saw the Modern Māori Quartet performing in New Zealand. And she was very taken with their performance. And as a result of that, they're now visiting Korea.
So it was initiated back in 2015?
I understand so, yes. Yeah. So it's an example of the kind of collaboration that comes of people-to-people contact. When Koreans visit New Zealand or vice versa, one thing leads to another, and it creates interesting creative opportunities for collaboration.
I see. So Ambassador, you just mentioned that Jeonju Sori World Festival has invited Modern Maori Quartet to Korea.
Yes.
What are the charms of Modern Maori Quartet?
Right. Well, I understand that the Jeongju Sori World Festival people were looking for a unique approach to music from particular cultures. And I think they found this in New Zealand with the Modern Māori Quartet. They performed in Jeongju and also in Seoul just last Friday. And what they do is a range of traditional Māori songs right through to modern thing. They sing, they play instruments, they interact with the audience, but they also do some very modern takes on traditional Māori songs. and some modern New Zealand songs. So it's a great opportunity for Korean audiences to see something of traditional New Zealand Maori culture and music.
I'm sure that was a great opportunity to learn about Maori culture as well for Koreans.
Yes, I'm sure it was.
So BIFF is currently underway in Busan,
Yes.
and I hear many from New Zealand's film industry are in Busan, and actually a New Zealand film has been invited to be screened at the festival. Can you tell us about the film?
Well, actually, 2 films.
Oh, 2 films.
So yes, there's a
Okay.
lot of interest from New Zealand. We're delighted to have 2 films in such a prestigious competition. I think the Busan International Film Festival
Right.
is known around the world. It's one of the leading film festivals in the world. So we're very excited to have 2 movies. One of them is called Savage, and it's quite challenging and quite realistic, dark movie about life inside gangs in New Zealand. So I think a slightly dark kind of movie, but a very interesting, quite dramatic movie. The second movie is called Daffodil, and it sounds like it's a lot lighter.
Right.
It's a musical, so there's some New Zealand music in it,
Oh,
and it's got some elements of romance and love and frustration in romance and love. So I think there are 2 contrasting movies from New Zealand, which I hope will give people a sense of the range and richness of New Zealand cinema.
Both of them sound really intriguing.
Yeah.
So I know that there has been very active exchange between Korea and New Zealand when it comes to film industry. What kind of exchanges and cooperative projects are going on now between our 2 countries?
Yeah, there's a lot going on in film. One thing is there is an emerging big and successful film studio in Auckland called the Kumyu Film Studio. And the Korean connection is it is owned by a Korean family who have immigrated to New Zealand, and they've built this film studio, and it's doing really well. So this film studio has been the location for some major movies from Hollywood, including The Meg, or Megalodon, which was a big movie hit of last summer about a giant shark. They've also filmed Mulan, the Disney live-action movie there. And there's some very big productions underway as well. So that's in Auckland. The best known film studio in New Zealand, though, is in Wellington. It's the Peter Jackson Weta Workshop studio, which did Lord of the Rings and Avatar and so on. And there is a Korean connection because Sir Richard Taylor, who is the genius behind the concept design of those movies, he has created a collaboration with Korea. And every year he comes to Korea and he's been running a fantasy design competition. This year he's partnering with Incheon City. So we had a big event at Incheon where we have a competition among young Korean designers and New Zealanders, and the winners get to travel to Wellington and spend time at Weta Workshop. Richard Taylor also brought some of his team up to Korea to kind of demonstrate and to run an academy for young designers in Korea. So that's exciting. And the third story I wanted to tell you is a story that is not yet a movie, but I very much hope will be a movie. It's called Yonga. You know Yonga, the song?
Yonga.
Yonga.
A love song.
Right? You know
Yes,
that.
right.
So for us, this is a very popular New Zealand Māori song. But for Koreans, you know it as a Korean song.
Right.
A love song. So there's a movie being made, or we hope it will be made, about how that song came to be.
Wow.
So it's around during the Korean War.
Interesting.
A young Māori soldier comes to Korea, falls in love with a Korean girl. Things, you know, they get together. He teaches her that song. And I don't know what happened to him, but that song then became popular all around Korea with Korean words. So
Very interesting.
it's a love story that unites the 2 countries.
Right, right. We hope many great films result from film industry exchange between
Yes.
Korea and New Zealand.
Yes.
And I know that we have a lot of exchanges and cooperative projects when it comes to film industry. But other than or besides film industry, is there another culture sector that is growing fast?
Well, I guess we should talk about K-pop.
Oh, yes.
As you may know, there's a big international K-pop festival in Korea and Changwon. So in many countries around the world, they hold K-pop competitions in each country, including New Zealand. And then the winner is invited to the global competition in Changwon. And the New Zealand group consists of 5 people from Wellington. So they're going to perform. I haven't seen them yet. But there are only 13 countries joining in this competition. New Zealand is one of them. And that demonstrates, I think, the extent to which K-pop is very popular in New Zealand. That's partly because there are a lot of Koreans in New Zealand. In fact, we've just had a census last year and we counted there's 37,000 Koreans living in New Zealand, mostly in Auckland, which is a lot. That's nearly 1% of the population. So there's a local Korean population. But there's also a lot of non-Koreans who are now very excited about K-pop. It's quite popular among young people.
So speaking of K-pop, I know that some members in Blackpink group are from New Zealand.
That's right. So both Jenny and Rosé have New Zealand connections in Blackpink. Yeah, and there are several other groups too. You know, Rap Monster RM from BTS. He also spent time in New Zealand. That's partly why his English is so good. So there are many, and these are typically Kiwis, we call them Korean Kiwis, or Korean New Zealanders who grew up in New Zealand or were educated in New Zealand and now have come back to Korea to pursue their careers. So again, it's a very vibrant relationship between Korea and New Zealand.
I think all of the people-to-people exchanges and students can be connected to the issue of culture exchanges. Is there any cultural event that your embassy is planning to hold in the near future?
Yes, there are a couple. One immediate event we're holding in 2 weeks' time is a piano recital right here. With
right
the piano
here in the living room?
in this residence, yes. So, and we talked about Kiwis. There are 3 young Korean New Zealand pianists that we're bringing together, and they're all young people. One of them, in fact, Hanul, is a high school student, and we're going to have a piano recital for the 3 of them to promote their careers.
That must be so beautiful.
I hope so. Yeah, I'm sure it will be great. And we're also thinking, we talked about film earlier, and we would like to put on a New Zealand film festival in Korea, possibly at Busan, and possibly also in Seoul. We're looking to do that next year, and I hope that comes to fruition.
I can't wait. So it's been about a year since you came to Korea, is that right? So how is it going so far?
Oh, it's marvellous. I'm really enjoying Korea. It's a remarkably interesting country and people, particularly at this time. There's a lot going on internationally with some difficult international issues, as you're aware. But the society in Korea is also changing quite rapidly and in very interesting ways. And Korean culture, Korean K-pop, music, film and so on is very popular around the world, and for good reason. It's very exciting what's going on here. So I can't think of a more interesting place in the world to be in 2019.
So is there any very interesting experience that you won't be able to forget about?
You know, one thing, there are many interesting experiences, but one thing that will stay with me, I think, is wherever I go in Korea, people remember the war, the Korean War, because so many people went through difficult times. So many people died, lost their houses, their families. The country was torn apart. And New Zealanders contributed to the war or to bringing peace. We still do. We have 6 New Zealanders on the peninsula today in the United Nations Command. So I'm struck by wherever I go in Korea, people are remember very clearly, and they always say how much they appreciate the New Zealanders' sacrifice for Korea. And many other countries too, with whose help Korea was able to resist the invasion and to create the prosperity and security that you have today. And I find it very moving. It's something that I think we don't think about enough as New Zealanders. And it's a very striking memory for me.
I see. So coming to Korea, you must have had a lot of plans in your mind. What kind of future plans do you have?
Well, we want to continue encouraging these exchanges, but one additional area that we're very interested in is tech or high tech. Korea obviously is well known all over the world for being a very advanced technological country. And New Zealand has a large number of very creative young people, especially doing startups in areas like software, gaming, concept design, movie backgrounds and so on. So we brought up a small group of companies from New Zealand to Korea earlier this year and connected them with some quite big Korean companies to see if there would be a fit. And there was a lot of interest on both sides. It was very successful. So we're very keen to do a lot more of that. So to connect our young people, especially high-tech young people who are looking at creating startups, making their own business, and encourage them to collaborate with young people in Korea and see where that takes us.
I see. I'm really looking forward to your future activities to even further improve our bilateral relations.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Kia ora.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you so much as well.
Thank you.
감사합니다.
고맙습니다.